Goliath, the most feared and infamous giant in all of biblical history, was a champion warrior from the Philistine army. He was known not only for his fighting prowess, but also for his incredible height, over 9 feet, about 3 meters. Imagine a giant standing tall on the battlefield, with his enormous size and overwhelming presence, making anyone who faced him tremble in fear. Goliath did not rely on his size alone to create fear. He also wore a heavy suit of armor made of metal plates stacked on top of each other, protecting him from all the sharp weapons of his enemies. Goliath's armor weighed over 125 pounds, about 57 kilograms, along with his bronze helmet, bronze leg guards, and massive spear weighing up to 15 pounds, about 6.8 kilograms, making his image even more terrifying. Even experienced warriors would be overwhelmed by such a fully armed opponent. But Goliath did not stop at showing off his strength. For 40 days, he stood on the battlefield and challenged the entire Israelite army, taunting and mocking them. Every morning and every afternoon, Goliath stepped forward, shouting loudly and demanding that someone brave enough to confront him. Not only did he represent the Philistine army, Goliath also represented the fear and pressure that the Israelite army had to bear every day when facing a giant enemy that no one could defeat. The image of Goliath towering on the battlefield, wearing a suit of iron armor that glittered in the sun, created a scene that was both impressive and terrifying. One can easily imagine the horror of the Israelite army when every day they had to witness the challenge from a giant that seemed impossible to defeat. David, a young shepherd boy, was the youngest of the family. He spent most of his time tending his father's sheep in the hills near Bethlehem. David was not a warrior by nature, nor had he ever been in battle. However, one day, his father, Jesse, worried about David's 3 older brothers who were serving in King Saul's army, called David and asked him to bring provisions to the battle camp to inquire about their news. Without hesitation, David got up early, prepared food including bread, cereal, and cheese, and set out for the battlefield. When he arrived, he witnessed a horrifying scene. The Israelite army was assembling, but no one dared to step out to fight. The reason was because Goliath, the Philistine giant, was still standing tall in the middle of the battlefield, constantly provoking and taunting the Israelites. Goliath not only demanded a duel, but also publicly insulted the entire nation of Israel and, worse, blasphemed the name of their God. Hearing the harsh insults from Goliath's mouth, David could not contain his anger. For David, this was not just a battle between men, but also a great insult to the God he worshipped. How could a pagan dare to challenge and insult the God of Israel? David could not accept this. David's heart was filled with a fire of faith and courage. Although he was just a young man, with no experience in the battlefield, he could not sit idly by and watch the name of God be insulted. David began to ask the soldiers around him about the situation and what would happen to anyone who dared to stand up and defeat this giant. Everyone around looked at him in amazement, because even experienced warriors did not dare to face Goliath. Yet this young man seemed so enthusiastic. David paid no attention to the warnings or doubts of others. For him, strength did not come from weapons or physical strength, but from his unwavering faith in God. David's anger at Goliath's insult and his sheer courage prepared him for this unequal confrontation. David believed that God, who had protected him from lions and bears while tending sheep, would protect him again, even if the enemy was a mighty giant like Goliath. When David decided to confront Goliath, both the Israelite and Philistine armies were astonished. Before their eyes, a young man who had never been in battle, without armor or heavy weapons, stood up to accept the challenge of a notorious giant. David, not wearing any of King Saul's armor because it felt too heavy and unfamiliar, carried only the simplest tools he used when tending sheep: a slingshot, a bag of stones picked up on the road, and a shepherd's staff. Goliath, seeing David approaching, burst into anger and mockery. With the arrogant eyes of a giant, Goliath felt insulted because his opponent before him was just a boy with no weapons, not looking like a warrior. He roared at David, "Am I a dog, that you come to me with sticks and stones?" I will tear you to pieces and leave your carcasses for the birds and wild animals to eat." Goliath's threatening and mocking words echoed throughout the battlefield, making the Israelites even more afraid. But David did not show any signs of wavering. While Goliath laughed at him, David remained steadfast in his faith, not relying on his own strength, but completely placing his trust in God. He replied, "You come to me with sword and spear, but I come to you in the name of the God of the armies of Israel, whom you have defied. Today the Lord will deliver you into my hands, and all the world will know that there is a God in Israel. It is not by sword and spear that the Lord saves, for the battle belongs to him." Without waiting a second, Goliath advanced, preparing to strike David with a mighty blow. But at the decisive moment, David, in a flash, pulled a stone from his bag, placed it in his sling, and threw it. The stone flew forward with incredible speed and accuracy, hitting Goliath squarely in the forehead, the only weak spot not protected by his heavy armor. The blow was so powerful that the giant fell to the ground, dead instantly. The entire Philistine army was stunned by this unbelievable sight. An invincible giant, long a symbol of fear and power, had been defeated with just a stone and the sheer courage of a young shepherd boy. Meanwhile, the Israelite army cheered loudly, full of spirit and excitement at David's glorious victory. David, armed with only a sling and a stone, not only defeated Goliath but also affirmed that true strength lies not in weapons or size, but in faith in God. It was David's determination, absolute faith, and extraordinary courage that turned this unthinkable confrontation into a miraculous victory that will forever be remembered in biblical history. With unshakable courage, David stood face to face with Goliath, completely unafraid of the giant figure and terrifying threat of his opponent. As Goliath advanced with arrogance and ferocity, David quickly pulled out a stone from his bag, placed it in his sling. He aimed straight at Goliath, and with an extremely accurate and powerful throw, the stone flew through the air, hitting the giant's forehead. The sound of the stone colliding with Goliath's forehead echoed throughout the battlefield. It not only hit Goliath's only weak spot, the part of his forehead that was not protected by his heavy helmet, but penetrated deeply, completely knocking the giant down. With a single blow, Goliath, the giant who had terrified the Israelites for 40 days, fell to the ground, without a cry, without a single resistance. The victory happened so quickly that everyone on the battlefield, both Philistine and Israelite, were stunned speechless. Even as Goliath fell, David did not stop. He ran forward, drew Goliath's own sword, and cut off the giant's head, thus proving his complete victory and ending the threat that had haunted his people for so long. When the Philistines saw that their champion, the symbol of strength and victory, had been defeated by a boy with only a stone, they were completely panicked. No one dared to stand still to fight. The entire Philistine army fled in confusion. The Israelites, who had been timid and fearful before, were now filled with excitement and courage. They rushed in pursuit of their enemies, leaving no one a chance to escape. The cheers were like thunder as they chased the Philistines, defeating them all over the battlefield, all the way to the gates of Gath and Ekron. The terror had shifted from the Israelites to the Philistines. The Philistine soldiers were cut down along the way. Their bodies were scattered everywhere, and the Israelites had won a great victory. The battle ended in a resounding victory for Israel, but more importantly, it was a lesson in faith and courage. David, armed with only a sling and absolute faith in God, defeated an enemy that no one thought could be defeated. This victory was not only a glorious feat of an individual, but also an affirmation that true strength lies not in weapons or size, but in faith and divine power. Goliath was not the only giant in his family. He had other brothers, all of whom were mighty and fearsome warriors, renowned for their enormous size and extraordinary strength. Goliath's brothers, like him, were regarded by the Philistines as invincible champions, representing the power and might of their enemies. However, their fate was no different from that of their giant brother whom David defeated. After Goliath fell at the hands of David, the faith and fighting spirit of the Israelites soared. David did not stop at his first victory, but continued to lead the Israelites in subsequent battles against the remaining giants. In later battles, one by one, Goliath's brothers were also destroyed, some by David himself and others by the mighty warriors in the Israelites' army, who were inspired by David's courage and steadfast faith. Those giants, with their terrifying size and strength, though seemingly invincible, were no match for God's divine protection. Through each victory, David and the Israelites not only defeated physically larger enemies, but also demonstrated a deeper truth. True strength lies not in size or weapons, but in faith in God. The story of the defeat of Goliath's giant brothers is a clear demonstration that God's power far surpasses any physical strength. The Israelite warriors, though small and inexperienced compared to their enemies, with their unwavering faith in God, were able to overcome all obstacles. By destroying the entire clan of giants, David and his army not only achieved military victory, but also strengthened their strong belief that God was always with them, guiding them to invincible victory. The fall of these giants became a living symbol of God's boundless power and a lasting reminder that no enemy, no matter how large or powerful, can stand before God's steadfast faith and guidance.